8 days to go, and with time growing short to make their closing arguments, only one candidate has opted for the in-your-face, brazenly divisive, audaciously offensive pitch to his fellow Americans, a kind of coming attractions of what a second Trump president would usher in and unleash on our fellow Americans. It came to a head last night at a rally at Madison Square Garden that the New York Times describes this way as, quote, a closing carnival of grievances, misogyny, and racism, a release of rage, end quote. And this, quote, a vivid and at times racist display of the dark energy animating the MAGA movement. And they got right to it. The racism started right out of the gate, no warm-up. With one of the opening acts, this comedian named Tony Hinchcliffe, or Cliffy. Normally, we would never platform this kind of racist rhetoric, but there are 8 days to go, and this is who Trump picked to speak to the country with 8 days to go. So we think it's important that you know who Trump picked and what he said.
There's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting there.
How bad do you have to be to offend a crowd who chose to go there? That bad. Now, the Trump campaign is distancing itself, even though they saw the speech and loaded it into the same teleprompter from which Donald Trump read hours later. But they're saying this, quote, the joke does not reflect the views of President Trump or the campaign. But again, as the Daily Beast is today reporting, quote, the comedian's remarks were preloaded into a teleprompter, indicating that they would likely have been vetted by the Trump campaign in advance. But take the joke guy out of it, because it wasn't just a comment from a comedian. Here's what the main events had to say, Trump surrogates.
She is some sick that Hillary Clinton, huh? What a sick son of a... The whole party, a bunch of degenerates, lowlives, Jew haters, and lowlives. Every one of them.
She is the devil, whoever screamed that out. She is the Antichrist.
She's a fake, a fraud. She's a pretender. Her and her pimp handlers will destroy our country.
It's going to be pretty hard to look at us and say, you know what? Kamala Harris, she got 85 million votes because she's just so impressive. As the first Samoan, Malaysian, low IQ, former California prosecutor ever to be elected president, it was just a groundswell of popular support.
How on earth is Fox getting by without him? So then the real, the meat and potatoes of the night, Trump. He took the stage 2 hours late, and then following those men, spewing hate and division and grievance and straight up racism and jokes so bad the MAGA crowd didn't laugh at them. Trump had every opportunity to pivot, right? He had a platform to say, you know what? That's not how I'm going to govern as president. Turn the temperature down, push back on the ugly rhetoric that preceded him. But he went with this instead.
But they're smart and they're vicious, and we have to defeat them. And when I say the enemy from within, the other side goes crazy, becomes a sound. Oh, how can he say? No, they've done very bad things to this country. They are indeed the enemy from within. But this is who we're fighting. The United States is now an occupied country, but it will soon be an occupied country no longer. Not going to be happening. Not going to be happening. November 5th, 2024, 9 days from now, will be Liberation Day in America. It's going to be Liberation Day. On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
The guy who couldn't get COVID tests across town is going to launch the largest deportation. Even if you like that stuff, why do you think he could actually do it? And make no mistake, going with hate as a closing argument is his choice. It's Chris LaCivita's choice, Susie Wells, the people associated with him. They have chosen this. But it's also an MRI of the entire Trump movement, arguably an MRI of Donald Trump, the man. It's also, as the Daily Beast reports, quote, political suicide, because taking a wild racist swing at Latino voters, every Puerto Rican voter in the country 8 days out from Election Day, quote, will almost certainly alienate more voters who might have voted for Trump. And it is hard to imagine that it has earned him one single new vote. By all measures, a moronic political strategy, which leaves one explanation. One, maybe he's not trying to win, and also this is who he is. It's also important to tell you today that this exact location does have echoes in history, in our country's history, its ugliest chapters. Later in the program today, we're going to be joined by legendary documentary filmmaker Ken Burns, and you might remember his three-part series on the U.S. and the Holocaust. It included footage from the now infamous pro-Nazi rally in 1939 at Madison Square Garden.
No group was more adamantly opposed to admitting Jewish refugees than the German-American Bund. 20,000 members would fill Madison Square Garden on Washington's birthday. They were led by Fritz Kuhn, a German immigrant who fancied himself the American Führer.
What we are actively fighting for under our charter. First, a social just white Gentile ruled United States.
White rule of the U.S. Got it? So the location, the message, white rule of the United States. The parallels are right there in front of all of us.
Sometimes the vote in a national election is about the fundamentals. You know, like, is this candidate a good choice on the economy? Sometimes it's about a different kind of fundamental. Does this candidate say he likes Hitler? Sometimes it's a more personal thing. When it comes to just liking each of these candidates or not liking each of these candidates, Americans broadly like Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz, and they broadly do not like Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance. The latest AP poll on just this sheer question, do you like him or don't you? It puts Kamala Harris +5 favorable, Tim Walz +5 favorable. It puts J.D. Vance -16 unfavorable, and Donald Trump -17 unfavorable. That's its own kind of election fundamental as well. You know, and maybe this election will come down to the fundamentals, right? Number one, economic basics. Harris and the Harris and Biden administration with a rip-roaring economic record to run on, literally the envy of the world. Maybe it'll be on number two, likability of the candidate. Voters like Harris roughly 22 points more than they like Donald Trump, who they really don't like at all. They just flat out like her and don't like him. She's positive, he's negative. She's positive by a little, he's negative by a lot. Another fundamental, number three, quality of the campaign. I mean, just take a little snapshot of the quality of the campaign right now at crunch time, 1 week out. Here yesterday was the local press coverage of Kamala Harris's day in swing state Pennsylvania. Philadelphia Inquirer. Kamala Harris goes to church, visits small businesses, and yet another visit to Philadelphia. Simultaneously, here was the local press coverage of Donald Trump's day in not a swing state, New York. New York Daily News. Racist rally. Speakers supporting Trump at his Madison Square Garden event insult Puerto Ricans, blacks, and Jews. And, you know, and when it comes to the quality of the campaign, not for nothing, but Trump has also been focusing his campaign message in these final few days to include really important issues like him saying that he thinks there's life on Mars, his top surrogate and funder Elon Musk telling a Trump rally crowd that there are aliens walking among us right now. Trump has also really ramped up all of his talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here at the end of the campaign. He says that RFK Jr. is going to get a big job in government. In Trump's terms, he's going to be in charge of making America healthy again. If Trump is reelected, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to get a big job. He's saying this more and more now on the campaign trail. He thinks this is awesome, while RFK Jr. himself is spending his end of the campaign talking about how we can't have Wi-Fi anymore in America because Wi-Fi causes something that he calls leaky brain. If you have Wi-Fi, you get leaky brain. Also, HIV doesn't cause AIDS. The early 90s called and they'd like their conspiracy theory back. So, maybe it's the economy, maybe it's the candidates, maybe it's the campaigns. I don't know how this election is going to be decided, neither do you. But there are two additional wild cards that we need to factor in to how this election is going to resolve. And we shouldn't have to factor either of these in, but we do. The first is the absolutely, totally telegraphed, easily foretold effort by the Republican Party to disrupt, subvert, ultimately to try to steal the election if they lose it, to try to flip the result or to cause enough chaos and delay and confusion that they prevent any clear election result from emerging. And as you know, we have covered this in detail now for most of the past 4 years since their last effort to overthrow an election result caused chaos and intimidation and violence and death and ultimately led to hundreds of people being convicted of crimes and sent to prison. They have professionalized their approach to the matter since then, and there's only a certain percentage, right, in covering this stuff ad nauseum. We know to expect it. We are ready to watch for it. At this point, there's no doubt that it is coming. There's not much to do to prepare for it except to know that it's coming. Sort of get your knees loose, get ready. We're watching for local Republican officials to refuse to certify election results, even when elections are run totally normally. We're looking for them to at least try to delay certification of local election results in order to make it seem like there's something wrong with the election in their area, so that can serve as a pretext for some sort of larger effort to gum up the works in that state. We're watching for Republican state legislatures, especially in swing states like Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Wisconsin, where Republicans have control of the legislature. We're watching for those state legislatures to try to submit electoral votes for Trump, even if Harris wins those states. Trump and House Speaker Mike Johnson started saying this weekend that they have a secret plan between them, between Trump and the Republican-controlled House, that's going to result in them doing, quote, really well in Trump's terms. Presumably, that's something to do with how the Republican-controlled Congress is planning to handle the counting of the electoral votes if Harris wins. That, of course, is dependent on Republicans keeping control of the House, so Mike Johnson will still be in charge, but apparently they have a plan in case he is. Republican state legislators recently refused to comment to Politico.com when they were contacted last week and asked if they have been in touch with the Trump campaign about trying some kind of fake electors plot again. CNN reported late last week that the House Administration Committee in Congress has just hired 2 people who were involved in Trump's 2020 fake electors plot. They've hired them to come on board as staff at that congressional committee right now to advise them on election matters. House Administration Committee is the committee that actually reads the electoral votes and advises members of Congress as to what procedures they should be following while doing things like reading and counting the electoral votes. Again, they've hired 2 people from Trump's fake elector scheme in 2020 to advise them as congressional staff for that process this year. So, yeah, that does not seem good. And we shouldn't have to worry about and watch for things like that in an election. But in the Republican Party's Trump era, we absolutely do. We should also expect that sometimes the goal will just be chaos. So nobody has trust in the result. Chaos and upset. That anger and dread you felt when you saw the headlines today and you saw these images today of burning ballots. The ballot drop boxes that were set on fire in Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, Washington. In Vancouver, Washington, hundreds of ballots were destroyed. In Portland, Oregon, interestingly, they think only 3 ballots were destroyed, and that's because they'd installed a fire suppressant system inside that Portland ballot drop box, and thank God they had. Again, only 3 ballots considered to be damaged in the Portland firebombing of a ballot drop box. They've been able, they say, to contact the 3 voters whose ballots were damaged in Portland. In Vancouver, where they believe it was hundreds of ballots destroyed, they're advising that people who put their ballots in that particular box that burned, people who put their ballots in sometime after 11 a.m. on Saturday, that was the last time it was emptied before the fire, people who may have used that ballot box in Vancouver, Washington, are being asked to contact the local elections department to get replacement ballots. Portland police say they think the 2 fires are connected. They say they caught a suspect vehicle on surveillance footage, and they're pursuing that lead. The FBI is investigating both of these as well. We shouldn't have to deal with what everyone is expecting to be a plan to subvert the election, to try to flip the result if the Democratic candidate wins. We shouldn't have to deal with efforts to stop the election, right? To burn ballots, to make us believe that there's no real knowable result. We shouldn't have to, but in the Trump era, we do.
Vulgar jokes and hateful comments grabbed headlines after the Trump rally at Madison Square Garden, but it's what the former president refused to say that has a whole lot of people worrying. During his speech, Donald Trump delivered a thinly veiled threat about the Republican-controlled House and the election. Just watch this.
You know, with me, we got to get the congressmen elected and we got to get the senators elected, because we can take the Senate pretty easily. And I think with our little secret, we're going to do really well with the House, right? Our little secret is having a big impact. He and I have a secret. We'll tell you what it is when the race is over.
A little secret. In a statement earlier today, House Speaker Mike Johnson refused to elaborate, saying only, quote, "A secret is not to be shared, and I don't intend to share this one." Well, you're in luck, because we have an extraordinary guest. I want to welcome Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. What an honor to have you here. I want to talk about a lot. I definitely want to talk about the Affordable Care Act. But I want to talk about this secret that Donald Trump is hinting he has with Mike Johnson. A lot of people are concerned. Maybe they're hinting at potentially the speaker not certifying the election. What do you think?
Well, first of all, let me say it's my pleasure to be here with you. We're not worried about what secrets he may have. It's no secret that we are going to win the House of Representatives, that Kamala Harris will still be vice president and will again preside in the way Mike Pence did, with integrity and constitutionally, and that we will be able to approve of the work of the Electoral College. So I don't know what he's talking about, but we don't spend time worrying about him. We agonize, we organize, and we're organizing to win the House, and we will. And Hakeem Jeffries will be Speaker that day on January 6th.
But if Speaker Johnson is not planning to certify the election, then what are we in for?
Well, you know what? Why don't we just win the election? We have one more week, and we'll see how that goes, and hopefully we'll know that night. But it is pretty exciting to see the enthusiasm. I'm almost in a different city every day, doing grassroots work as well as message and money, the mobilization on the ground. And that's what we're doing. And I've never seen so much enthusiasm of people wanting to get out there, knock on doors, make the calls, write the postcards, text their friends or people they're taxed to do. And we
even more than when Barack Obama was running, even more than that?
Yeah. Because Barack Obama was spectacular, but this is urgent, and they know that. And if you've heard people say this is the most crucial election of our time, and we always think it is until this time. This is not like we're running against George Bush or John McCain or Bob Dole or
Mitt
Romney. That's really the democracy, where you have your ideas and you compete and one party other wins. This is about saving our democracy, but more importantly, about the kitchen table issues of American people. What's his name is putting out there is ridiculous. And what gets me is that people say, well, I don't like what he says and I don't like how he says this or that, but I liked his policy. What policy? To give a tax. The only thing he did when he was president with a Republican Congress was to pass a tax bill that gave 83% of the benefits to the top 1%, corporations and individuals, the top 1%, adding $2 trillion to the national debt. $2 trillion to the national debt. They're so fiscally responsible. No, we are the ones. And when Joe Biden came in, what did he do? Under his leadership, 16 million jobs created. The other guy, the worst job creation record of anybody since Herbert Hoover.
When you talk about kitchen table issues, health care is clearly one. The Affordable Care Act is now an issue. If Donald Trump wins, he's been very outspoken. He wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, and all he's articulated is he's got concepts of a plan. If the Affordable Care Act is in question or under attack again, what saved it last time was John McCain.
Yep.
Is there a Republican now, a trusted Republican, that you could look to say, well, they'd serve as John McCain this time around?
I don't think that we are going to win the House.
All right.
You understand? There's no use speculating on what isn't going to happen. We don't agonize, we organize. Let me just say this. As we're going door to door, what we're hearing is about health care. And when we won in the election in 18, when people, that's what saved the country. We won the House in 2018, so we could hold him in check. But people said, weren't you lucky? Health care became the issue of the campaign. I said, no, we weren't lucky. We made our own luck. We had thousands of meetings around the country where people came and talked about the need for keeping the Affordable Care Act. That's how we saved it. Then from all of their assaults, and of course John McCain was the vote heard around the world with that. But he what's his name? He says Obamacare sucks. Forgive my French. I'm just quoting a person who wants to be the president of the United States. Obamacare sucks. No, it doesn't suck. It cures. And if he were to prevail, which God forbid he would not, there would be like 45 million people would lose their health care right away. Over 100 million people in our country have a pre-existing medical condition. It's over for them.
Then let me ask you, because you brought up this point earlier of all these people who say, oh, I don't like what he says, but I like his policies. I ask you, when they tell you that, what are the policies? Besides tax cuts for corporations, besides, blanket deregulation, what do you think it is that have so many people still willing to vote for this person?
Well, it depends on who you're talking about.
Okay.
If you're talking about the billionaire class.
Sure, I get that one.
Class.
Yes.
Okay. They don't want to pay their fair share of taxes. They don't want any protections in the law.
But that's not Donald Trump's base.
No, I understand that. But it's his funding. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of his funding. So it's not that many people, but it's his funding. And he's misrepresented. You have to give him credit for being a great snake oil salesman. He's a con man. So they don't even, there's hardly anything that you could name that he did in their interest. But people see their interest their own way. But this is, healthcare is not just about what I talked about, having the coverage and pre-existing conditions. It's about reproductive health as well. And this is where, I'm telling you, the army of volunteers out there is so massive and it is so encouraging. And so we see people very carefully doing their voting. In California, we have a very long ballot, I can tell you that. And so it takes time, but we will, everybody will do everything precisely so it won't be in question. But health care has emerged because it's a kitchen table issue. It's a health issue. And let me just say one other thing about that kitchen table, the cost of prescription drugs. We have been working for a long time. Finally, under President Biden and Kamala Harris, we were able to get the bill passed without one Republican vote to lower the cost of prescription drugs. If you were using insulin, it was $500–600 a month. Now it is $35 a month for seniors on Medicare. Now we want that for everyone. We can finally negotiate for lower prices because we passed the bill. And so this was a great breakthrough. At the handmaiden of the pharma industry, Trump has said, they're going to, well, they've even taken us to court on that. Also, a health issue to me is the air people breathe and the water they drink. And he said to the fossil fuel industry, just give me $1 billion and I'll get rid of all that we've done to save the planet. I had my grandbaby with us earlier today. He's 11 months old. He'll live till the next century. And we want to make sure that all of our children and grandchildren go through life with a planet that is sustainable, that a democracy that is strong and protecting their freedoms, and a society that has fairness. Not somebody who's giving tax breaks to the wealthy. And then listen to the positive campaign that Kamala is putting forth, agenda for the future, her vision for the future versus his. So when they say they like his policy, I'm thinking, name one thing. Did you want no health care, access to health care? Do you want to give rich people the tax break at your expense, adding trillions of dollars to the national debt?
Well, I hear you clearly saying Kamala Harris is going to win. Democrats are going to take the House. Yeah. Well, you're a California girl. Who's going to win the World Series?
Well, today I am celebrating the anniversary of the Giants winning the World Series in 2012. It was their second win in 3 years.
Okay, but San Francisco's not in the game. But the L.A. Dodgers, I'm guessing, you're rooting for?
Well, I am always rooting for California. I was hoping that the Baltimore Orioles, because I'm a fan of Baltimore, too, would have been in the series. So, again, I'm rooting for the national anthem. That's one thing we can all agree. And my favorite line in the national anthem is, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there.
So I spent 10 years working for the Obamas through 2 campaigns and 2 presidential terms. And right now we are getting almost daily reminders of the fact that they are both very, very good at this. Over the weekend, Michelle Obama made a searing and impassioned plea to men on this issue of abortion rights. Donald Trump whined at his rally tonight about how, quote, nasty she was, which tells you a lot. It's a pretty good indicator she's under his skin. And here's President Obama just moments ago in Philadelphia, completely letting loose on Donald Trump's racist, hate-filled MAGA rally at Madison Square Garden we've been talking about that happened last night.
The man holds this big rally at Madison Square Garden. And the warm-up speakers were saying the most, we're trotting out and peddling the most racist, sexist, bigoted stereotypes. One guy called Puerto Rico, quote, an island of garbage. Now, these are fellow citizens he's talking about. Here in Philadelphia, they are your neighbors. They are your friends. They are your co-workers. Their kids go to school with your kids. These are Americans.
Joining me now is Tommy Vitor. He worked for Barack Obama when he was a senator. He worked for his 2008 campaign for president, and he worked for him in the White House so many, many years. He's now co-host of Pod Save America. Tommy, it's great to see you. First of all, how are your vibes this close to the election?
Unbelievably anxious, barely sleeping, just a mess generally. How about you?
Well, that's not lifting me up. Okay, I'm a combo of all the feelings. Okay, but let me just start by asking you this. I mean, we both worked for Barack Obama. You worked for him before I did. We know how good he is at this. But one of the things you're deciding in a campaign is kind of how to use people like him. It's not about moving everybody who likes him over to support her. That's just not possible. But talk a little bit about what they want out of him. They maybe want him to do that, but they also want him, I think, to excite and engage people and get them off their couches. But what do they want from the campaign from him?
Yeah, and look, Jen, I feel that way every October in an election, so I didn't mean to freak anybody out there. I think Barack Obama is the most popular Democrat elected official in the party. So he's someone who can get out a big crowd, rally the faithful, convince Democrats to get out to vote if they haven't already. I think he's also been speaking directly to African-American voters and is uniquely credentialed that way. I also think he's someone who's known Kamala Harris for a very long time. And in an election where you have a bunch of undecided swing voters saying they need more information about her, he can credential her. He can say, look, when I was president, She was a senator from my own party, and she fought me to be tougher on banks because that's who she is when she was California Attorney General. So, it's a compelling combination of messages from him.
No question. Now, I wouldn't say that. I guess we're saying this on TV. You may agree with me, but Michelle Obama might even be better than Barack Obama at this. If you watch the rally this weekend, they're both very good. But and I mentioned this, and we've texted about this. Her message appealing to men on abortion rights, a lot of what she said was really appealing. But I know for you this is quite personal, but it was very powerful, and I think people underestimate the broad audience of people who care about it. But I know that her remarks struck you. What struck you about her remarks?
Yeah, I mean, look, she had this 8-minute section at the end of her speech that was all about the stakes of the debate over women's reproductive health care freedom for women and men in this country. And I thought it was incredibly powerful because I've never heard a politician speak that way. But also, as someone who has experienced pregnancy loss with my wife, as someone who's been in a doctor's room when you get the most devastating news imaginable, to then imagine a scenario where a doctor says they can't provide her life-saving care until she's on death's door because of Trump's abortion ban, that really was powerful emotionally. And I think that's something that a lot of men need to think through because it is not a choice. It is not something that is rare. I mean, these complications happen to a lot of people, and the consequences can move quickly and be deadly. And so she laid out the stakes in a way that I thought was incredibly emotional and powerful, and I hope it reaches a lot of people.
A lot of people wouldn't be as comfortable talking about it as you are, so I know that's very powerful. So let me say that. Let me also just ask you, there's so little time left here, and the vice president is giving a big speech tomorrow night. It's a choice to do a speech at the Ellipse. It's a very powerful message. There's expectations it's going to be all about January 6th. It's not going to be, I don't think. What do you think is the most powerful thing she can do in that speech tomorrow? You've been a part of these crafting of messages and these final closing arguments.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I do think the speech is going to be, obviously, the frame is it being at the Ellipse, and that will be sort of the context through which it's reported on. I do think it's going to be a lot bigger. And I think at the end of the campaign, you're trying to frame a choice. Everything has to be a contrast of how Kamala Harris will fight for you and care about you and try to make your life better versus what Donald Trump will do and the way he is more focused on sucking up to corporations that will give him big PAC checks, billionaire donors who want a tax cut, right? So she's got to hammer home that choice. And I also think she has to fill in what's left of an information gap about her. People want to know more about her values, where she's from, her bio. There's a lot of people that just have not thought about this election yet. That's impossible for people like us to fathom sometimes. But there are these late-breaking, undecided voters who are literally thinking, like, I don't know who I'm going to vote for, so I'm going to figure it out this week. And these last messages are critical for reaching them.
Our old friend and boss, David Plouffe, said about 4%, which is hard to fathom, but still. And just reassure everybody, Tommy is always anxious every October, so don't make that freak you out. There are positive signs of light. Tommy, it's great to see you. Thank you so much. Well, I'll be listening to your next several episodes between now and Election Day.
Joining us now, Phil Prazan, who anchors Lone Star Politics and is a reporter for NBC Dallas-Fort Worth. Phil, I'm so glad you're able to join us this morning. So these polls show the race pretty close right now, within the margin of error. But Democrats have been saying for years Texas is about to turn blue. It hasn't. So where do things stand?
Well, great to be with you this morning. This is a competitive race. It has been a competitive race for a little bit now. Both candidates have a path to victory. Senator Cruz has a bigger and a better path, but Congressman Allred has a plan. He seems to be working that plan, and that plan really comes down to Republican voters who may be turned off away from Ted Cruz. If he can get those voters, he has a better chance of winning. And believe it or not, there are Trump Allred voters. I personally have talked to some of them. And then also Senator Cruz consistently underperforms former President Trump in most of the public polling we've seen. So that is a factor. And then what's really interesting for us here in Texas is, all right, so 6 years ago, Senator Cruz won by roughly 215,000 votes. Since then, in the last 6 years, we have now more than 2.5 million new registered voters. Who are these people? We have a general idea of who they are. Some are Republican political refugees from New York, California, those states. Some are young, diverse voters. Some are new naturalized citizens who have just registered to vote. In North Texas alone, in the last year, about 60,000 people have become citizens through the naturalization process. So it's going to be really interesting to watch.
I'm really curious to hear what issues might be motivating Texans in this race, which may favor one candidate or the other, right?
Well, you have the big ones, right? You have immigration, border security, you have the economy, you have abortion or reproductive rights. But when we're talking about those swing, moderate Republican voters in the middle, a lot of them live in the suburbs. Colin Allred needs these people to cross over. That's why you see him talking about abortion and reproductive freedom. And that's why you see him highlighting that now infamous trip that Ted Cruz took to Cancun. He believes that that is those are issues that can move voters his way. If you're Senator Cruz, you want to keep those traditionally Republican voters voting Republican down ballot. So that's why he's talking about immigration and border security consistently. That is the #1 issue of Texas Republicans year after year after year. And then also the transgender issue. Congressman Colin Allred has taken some votes on that issue that might have played better in his Dallas district. And it's just a tougher sell when it comes to selling that statewide. That's why you see some pretty dramatic ads from Senator Cruz and also Colin Allred responding with his own ads on that issue.
Phil, we don't think of Texas as a presidential swing state, but we did see Vice President Harris and Trump there on Friday. How unusual is that so close to Election Day? And could those visits move the needle at all here in like a Senate race?
So it's a symptom of our nationalization of politics, but there are two impacts. One is locally, like you said. If Vice President Harris can get Texas in the low single digits, that is when somebody like Colin Allred could sneak across the finish line with those Republican swing voters. And she had her event in Houston, which is Harris County, and that is the Democratic powerhouse county in the state of Texas. If they really juice the turnout there, this state will become more competitive. And then also I think part of it was she wanted to redirect the conversation to abortion and reproductive rights here in Texas. We are the kind of ground zero for that with our strict anti-abortion laws that only has a very narrow medical exemption. It doesn't have an exemption for rape or incest. So, there was a lot of attention about what the former president has said. I think she wants to redirect the conversation, what she wants to talk about, which is reproductive freedom. And then, we had former President Donald Trump in Austin on Friday, too. He was talking to the podcaster Joe Rogan, very popular podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience. And the thing to watch about that is former President Trump needs to expand the electorate, right? He needs to find people who have not voted before and turn them out to vote. And he thinks he can do that by activating young men who listens to Joe Rogan and also Theo Von, Logan Paul, some of these other manosphere podcasts. He thinks he can activate them and turn them out to vote. If he does this, his path is better come Election Day.
Really enlightening conversation. Thanks for giving us the insights there in Texas. Phil Prazan, great to have you here. And now joining us, Democratic Senate candidate from the state of Texas, Congressman Colin Allred. Congressman, thanks for making time for us. It is the home stretch, just 8 days to go. And the polls show essentially a toss-up race. But Cruz has also faced quite a close race, as you'll remember, against Beto O'Rourke back in 2018. He went on to win. So why do you think the outcome of your race will be different this time?
Well, this is not about our past. It's about our future. This is a different election, a different time. And to be quite honest, Senator Cruz has continued to show how he should not be placed in a position of authority for 6 more years with going to Cancun when we needed him most. That's happened since the last election, with trying to overturn the last presidential election, with being uniquely responsible for this abortion ban that we have here in Texas, for taking down a bipartisan border bill that no state would have benefited more from than Texas. And I'm also a different opponent. I'm the most bipartisan Texan in Congress. I've got a record of winning in tough races, and we're going to beat Ted Cruz on November 5th.
I understand your internal polling shows the race essentially tied, much tighter than even that New York Times within the margin of error stat we just gave. What's your team seeing that other pollsters are missing?
Listen, honestly, I leave that to my team. To me, we're way past polling. We've had hundreds of thousands of votes already banked, and this is a time where Texans are voting right now. And what Texans need to know and what folks watching this need to know is that they can go to callinallred.com, get involved with us, knock on doors, make phone calls, turn out the vote, contribute to our campaign. This is how we win down the final stretch, is that we have built a machine that we can now turn out this vote, but it takes all of us and every single person getting involved. So for anyone watching this who understands how important this race is, I hope you'll do that.
Donald Trump has a 50% favorability rating there in Texas. Cruz appeared with Trump when he was there on Friday. To those who think the Trump factor will get Cruz over that finish line, what's your message?
Well, it's just not. I think Texans see this as two very different decisions. Number one, we've been dealing with Ted Cruz for 12 years here, and we've seen exactly, how ineffective he has been. We're picking someone who's going to serve us longer than the term of the next president. And I think Texans just know that we can't count on Ted Cruz in a crisis. That's how you go to Cancun when folks need you most. And as I said earlier, he's running against me, and he's running in a race where I have made sure that Texans know my story, that I'm a fourth-generation Texan that's raised by a single mother, captained the football team at Baylor, played in the NFL, became a lawyer, I've served in Congress in a way that shows it's possible to do the exact opposite of Ted Cruz. And that's what I think Texans are going to try and turn the page towards on November 5th, and for fresh ideas and new leadership.
Texas is a border state, of course, and we know immigration and border security, big issues there. Your opponent, Ted Cruz, says you have flip-flopped on this, pointing to your past remarks, calling the border wall racist, for example. Now you're supporting a border bill that is funding in part for a border wall. What do you say to those folks, those voters in Texas who don't really know where you stand, who might think you've changed your stance on immigration for political reasons?
Listen, my family's from Brownsville, the tip of Texas. My grandfather was a customs officer there. I spent a lot of my childhood in our border communities. So this is personal for me, and I'm not going to put up with any nonsense from Ted Cruz on this. This guy has had 12 years to try and do something about the southern border, and he has not only not done anything, he's prevented us from doing anything. Just earlier this year, he said we don't need a border bill. Well, what was in that? $20 billion for border security, for 1,500 new Border Patrol agents. Where would they have been in Texas? For more immigration judges, where would they have been? Helping out to deal with our asylum backlog. For technology to stop fentanyl, that would have helped Texas. So, and this is not the first time. Back in 2013, he took down a bipartisan effort that President Obama and a group of senators are working on to try and reform our legal immigration system. He's done this his entire career. He'll never get the job done. I think Texans are understanding that, and that if we continue to do the same thing and expect a different result, that's kind of the definition of insanity.
Congressman, I do want to get your reaction real quickly on the topic we spent a lot of time speaking about at the top of the show, the remarks we heard yesterday at Madison Square Garden from Trump allies, Trump and others that could be considered divisive at least, but racist and beyond. What's your reaction? We know there's a huge Latino population there in Texas who may have strong feelings about what they heard.
Yeah. Well, Texas is an incredibly diverse state. We are diverse in every sense. We have folks from all over the world who've made their home in Texas. And my entire life, I've grown up in a state knowing that not only, as you said, are we a border state, but we're a state that has embraced our diversity. And, we have our own version in Ted Cruz of somebody who has spent his entire time in the Senate pitting Texans against each other, trying to take the seams in our society and widening them, telling folks that the issue is the person who's next door to you or down the street from you or down the block from you. And that's just not who we are as Texans, and it's not who we are as Americans. And we have to make sure that we drive this kind of nonsense out of our politics. And the way we do that is at the ballot box. That is how we get folks to understand that this is not only bad in terms of the wrong thing to do and wrong for our country, that it's bad politics, and that you'll lose elections when you talk like this, when you spend 12 years, as Ted Cruz has done, behaving this way, that you won't come back. And I promise you then we'll see a better politics, and we'll see our public discussions end up in a much healthier place.
Joining us now is veteran journalist Julio Ricardo Varela, founder of the Latino newsletter and an MSNBC columnist. I also have to say, on a personal level, someone who I very much respect. Julio, I've got to tell you, just the beginning of our conversation, I've just feel sick to hear someone, anyone, anywhere, talk about Puerto Rico like what he did, and then that comedian. And I was struck by your comments last night. You posted on social media, quote, "I am tired. So tired of the continued American tradition of using comedy to insult Puerto Ricans, from West Side Story to Seinfeld to Work It to the Trump comedian today. It's raw and insulting." And Julio, how do you express what it is that we're all feeling?
You know, Jose, it's just that felt exhausting, because it doesn't surprise me. And I'm really glad you shared the tweet, because, I've been a Puerto Rican for more than 50 years. And I do think there is an American tradition of just assuming that we're just second class and we're garbage, Jose. And the fact that even in this political campaign, people laugh it off. And what I'm really, really disappointed about fellow Americans is that they lack the understanding of who we really are as a people. And so we become this trope, this stereotype, this joke that has just become part of the American culture, and anyone can get away with it. And I'll be honest with you, Jose, that's the reason why I use that example. This isn't a right and left issue anymore. And I know there's a lot of talk about well, this is going to win Puerto Ricans for Harris in Pennsylvania and Florida. Let's put the politics aside for a second. This is about respecting a people. This is about respecting a people that have been part of the United States since it was invaded in 1898. This is about colonialism, right? And we don't talk about this as Americans. And we don't talk about the fact that political parties have been perpetual supporters of a colonial system that, to be honest with you, has done very little to improve Puerto Rico. Ever since Hurricane Maria in 2017, you've seen a change on the island. And people are starting to understand that, yes, we are part of the American political system, but we demand respect and we demand sort of being paid attention to. And yes, the timing of this politically is going to benefit the Harris campaign. But at the same time, we've been here before with the Trump campaign, Jose, in 2015. Everyone was like, well, he's attacking Latinos, and he won. So I think we have to sift the political from the humanity aspect of it. And I wanted to use that tweet to elevate who we are as a people.
To think that even in 1898, the Treaty of Paris, 1898, the Treaty of Paris, where no one but the powers were included, not even as observers. And I'm talking about Puerto Rico, and I'm talking about Cuba, and let's talk about the Philippines, and let's talk about what that has meant, the repercussions of that till today. But Julio, and to think how the people of Puerto Rico have put their quota of blood fighting for the United States of America in every single conflict. The biggest quota of blood has been by, among others, Puerto Ricans. And it's just infuriating to see that this can be included in a discussion about politics. And it also is more than just Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans. Here's, for example, Julio, part of what former President Trump said about his opponent and about migrants. Take a listen to this.
She has violated her oath, eradicated our sovereign border, and unleashed an army of migrant gangs who are waging a campaign of violence and terror against our citizens. They're coming from all over the world. Over the last month, 181 countries violated our laws. and she has resettled them into your communities to prey upon innocent American citizens.
And, you know, you were just talking about this. This is nothing new. I mean, you know, go back to 2015.
No,
go back to 2015.
It's not nothing. And this is the part that that really infuriates me about this, Jose. You know the people that are living here. Like, you know, this whole notion of migrant gangs and Venezuelans. How many Venezuelans do you know who believe in the American dream right now? I mean, I know them personally, right? And they're the ones that are saying, that's not who we are, right? And so the thing is, this is a clear moment in American history. And you know, American history has always been like this, right? We always have to blame the other. And here we go again. So this is a defining electoral moment for this country where it gets to this very simple conclusion. Are we afraid of change, right? Or are we understanding that the best that America can offer is that we continue to move with the change, right? And so I understand, you know, we can get into immigration enforcement policy, bipartisan issue for the last 30 years. Look it up. There's plenty of words that came out of Democratic presidents in the 90s that are coming out of Trump's mouth. And I'm not trying to equate this, but at the same time, we need to be honest with ourselves as an American society that we're either going to say that the American dream is the greatest marketing message in the world, and that's what's attracting people to here, and that's what makes America amazing, our immigrant and migrant communities. Or we're going to say we're going to close up shop and we're not going to let anyone else in. And I don't think that's what America is. And I still believe in the messiness of American democracy. As a Puerto Rican, I still believe that Puerto Rico has a future in the context of America. But but the thing is, the history will prove that there's pasito a pasito, little steps to what we believe is American democracy. And, you know, we're used to the Trump message. Latinos are tired of Trump's message. We know he's extreme. He's going to get 35%. It's the other 65% of Latinos who are like, I'm done with this.
Julio Ricardo Varela, I very much appreciate, always very much appreciate you on this day, maybe more than you will know. Julio Ricardo Varela, thank you.
Gracias.
Appreciate it.